Hi everybody. This is the first time I've done this, so fingers crossed it runs smoothly. So, how's manual testing had its day? So firstly, I just wanted to put a little bit about myself. So, I'm married to a Scrum professional. Any guesses who? I'm a QA engineer at Dunelm in Syston. I've been a QA for 12 years now, working across different varying projects such as e-commerce, SAP. HHTs, by the way, stands for handheld terminals, which are the little devices that they use in stores to do all their dispatching and all their orders. I've worked in Waterfall, worked in Agile, I've done Scrum and Kanban and a little bit of XP without realising it. I'm a keen baker. As an example of a cake that I made, someone asked me to make a cake for their husband, and when they said his name was James Bond, I was not making a football cake for James Bond, let's put it that way. I'm dog mad, as anybody that knows me will know, hence the 2 pictures of my dog on here. English Heritage member, so weekends and holidays we like to go out, and there's a site down there that we went to in Northumberland. I'm a host for Ministry of Testing Software Testing Clinic, which is soon to be called Test Essentials, so it's going to be rebranding in the new year. Co-organiser for Agile Leicester, and of course speaking at Agile and testing events, this is my 3rd lightning talk, I think. My very first one was actually here in this building at Agile Northants 2 years ago, so it's nice to be back. So what I'm going to talk about today is what is automation, what are the advantages of automation, what are the disadvantages of automation, and what value can manual testing add. So firstly, what is test automation? So automation, so as you can see in here, it's checking repetitive but necessary tasks. So for example, if you've got a regression suite of 100, 200, 300 tests, and say you're doing 2-week sprint cycles, you don't want to be manually doing 200 tests every single 2 weeks. It's going to be quite repetitive and take up a lot of time. And test automation allows you to compare actual outcomes with predicted outcomes. So you may think you know what it's going to be, so you'll run a test, automate a test, and compare the results. It's the control execution of tests. So yeah, so you've got your 100, 200 tests, and you know exactly what you're going to run and when you're going to run them. You could run them daily, weekly, or you can run them as and when you do a code deployment, however many times a day that may be. And typical examples of automation would be load testing, performance testing, stress testing, and as I mentioned before, regression testing. And here, I've just put a few examples on here of different programs that you can use to automate your tests. Because I think when people think about test automation, they probably think about 2 or 3, but there's actually, this is only a selection. There's hundreds of different tools out there that you can use to automate your test reads. At the moment, I'm looking at APM. So we're looking, in the team I'm looking at, to automate our handheld terminal journeys, something that's not been done apparently, so it'll be interesting. So advantages of automation. So you get quick feedback. So if you've done a code deployment, you can hit the button for your automation tests, and you'll know instantly whether what code you've implemented has broken anything or whether it's passed. High test coverage. So again, you can quickly run 200 tests, depending on what systems you're using. You can multi-thread the test as well to speed it up. So one of the things automation is looking for fast feedback. So if you put a code change in, you want to know as soon as possible whether anything is broken. It's early detection of defects, frees up time for other tasks, such as manual testing, and reduces business expenses. So obviously business expense, if you've got one person manually running 200 tests, it's probably going to take a day, maybe. Whereas to automate those and to run the automation could take it down to an hour, maybe less. Disadvantages of test automation. Tests break all the time, and there could be a number of reasons why that test is broken. Initially, it could be because you've put some code in, and that code has broken something that currently exists. So whenever we're at Dunelm, we have to come in the morning, we check through our test automation pack to make sure, to see if we've got any failures. If I've got a test failed, the first thing I do is manually do that test, because then I can see whether it's the code that's broken. If it's not, then you can start going in and debugging. So by debugging, you can look to see, was it an environmental issue? Did the environment go down at a specific time? And you can kind of do a bit of digging into that and then work out what the actual failure was. Test maintenance, again, so if a test does fail because of a code release that you've put in, you then have to go back through all of those tests, and you need to work out what's changed and what the impact is. So someone needs to constantly be looking at those tests and refactoring those tests so the next time you run your automation, it runs through smoothly. Tests are only as good as the code that is written. So if you've got, I could write 100 automation tests right now, but I don't know what I'm doing. So I could write them, and I could write them so that they pass. It doesn't mean to say that they're good tests. It doesn't mean to say that they're valid tests. But I've given you 100 tests that pass. But it's knowing what those tests actually give you. So you need to understand what it is you're trying to obtain from those tests. Tests are only as good as the person who has written them. So again, like I said, I could write them, and they might just be completely invalid. And you cannot and should not automate everything. So when I say you cannot automate everything, so for example, if I've got a button on a website and it says, click here, I can click there and my test might pass. But what I'm not going to be able to automate is whereabouts I click. I'm not going to write 100 test scripts for one button. I'm not going to write, if I click on the left-hand side of the box, if I click just on the outside of the box, if I click on the edge of the box, if I double-click on the box, if I click really, really quickly on the box, there's probably about 5 tests just for one button. So if you've got a whole website, you're going to end up with thousands of tests. So what when you're looking at test automation, you're looking at, going back to what Dominic said, what adds value? What adds the most value? What is it that you're trying to look at? If you're looking for quick feedback, you want to look at your core scenarios, so things like your payment journeys, your order journeys. What is it you want to know quickly? And you should not automate everything. So when I say you should not automate everything, you wouldn't want to automate your production tests. So the good thing with automation is you can program it so that once you've done your code deployments at the end of the day, you can run your automation overnight, come back in the morning, and see what's passed and what's failed. If you've got a production deployment going out that evening, and you're like, okay, everything's fine, I'm just going to run some automated tests whilst I'm out of the office, come back in the morning. If they've failed, you need to then look at those, and they could have failed because the tests fell down for whatever reason. It could be an environmental issue, or worse, it could be that there's a problem with your production code. And if there's a problem with your production code, you don't want to be coming in the office 8 hours later and finding that out, because it could be the whole website's down and your customers have gone 8 hours without receiving orders. So what value can manual testing add? So manual testing gives you the human touch. So nobody uses a website or a system like a customer uses a system. You can have a manual to say to you, this is my functional specification, or these are my requirements for the test, this is the way that I would like it to work. And you can automate all of that. You can manually test all of that. But then you want to do some exploratory testing, because a customer doesn't have a manual in front of them. They don't say, oh, I'm not allowed to press that button. I've got to press this button. I've got to press them in this order, because if I don't press them in that order, it's not going to work. And even if you did give them that manual, they're still not going to do that. They're going to go, well, what happens if I press this button? It's not working. I'm just going to double click. I'm going to keep clicking on that button until something happens, and then it's going to break. So I've mentioned exploratory testing. So exploratory testing is one of my favorite testing tasks, actually. So you can literally explore the system. You can pin it down to like certain areas. You can build test charters. And exploratory testing, what it can do is it can actually open up your insight to new ideas for actual test automation candidates. Requirements analysis, I've put this on here because when you get a list of requirements, a QA would probably look through them and they'll be saying, what if I did this? What if I did that? So you'll be liaising with your PO and your developer and also your business analyst to say, this requirement here says X, but have you thought about this? And the last thing you want to do is be getting a code delivery to you and you haven't thought about that, and then you start going in and then there's more questions once that's in your development cycle. Code reviews. Code reviews is something that I recently got into as well. So does everybody know what a code review is? Yeah? Yeah, so I like doing code reviews, but that's something that you can't automate. It's manual. You have to kind of literally look over it line by line by line. I mean, I guess you could automate it, but you wouldn't want to. You'd want to have that human eye over it. I've mentioned new test ideas and candidates for automation. They kind of feed into each other, really. So these are the things that manual testing can bring to the table. So I've got a couple of diagrams now, courtesy of Dan Ashby, who's from the Ministry of Testing. So what Dan talks about on this diagram here is everything is built around information. So whether you want to do that manually or whether you want to automate that, the key thing that you're looking for is information. So I talked about automation being checking activities. So whether that's a human or a machine doing that, your checking activities are scripted. And your scripts, they inform the testing activities. And what they do, they also confirm information. Information then informs your testing activities. And then testing activities then uncover information. So it all relates back to information. So, like I say, whether it's automation or whether it's manual, we're looking for information at the end of the day. The next one up here is a bit busy. I hope you can all kind of see that from over there. Everything starts with an idea. And then from an idea, you kind of build out using these. And some of these things that you can automate, some of these things that you can't automate, some of them are purely manual tasks. So things like your three amigos. It's a conversation, and it's manual. It's a manual testing activity. Mind maps, again, that's a manual activity. But like I say, everything starts with an idea. In testing charters, testing notes, code reviews, there's so much stuff on here that is manual, and it requires a manual intervention. I think that might be it. So yeah, and I just wanted to finish with a quote that says it's automation, not automagic. So thank you.